She married a human to end the war, then learned why no empire dares to fight them. Best HFY story. The sun was setting over the jagged cliffs of Korath Prime, painting the desert in shades of red and gold. Dust swirled across the wide plains where human outposts had once stood in proud defiance. Commander Lyra Vey of the Astralis Empire rode slowly across the ridge, her cloak catching the dying light, eyes scanning the horizon. She had seen many wars, but this one felt different. Different because it had dragged on for decades, because human stubbornness defied logic, and because of the orders from the Empress herself. Lyra's mission was clear: negotiate peace with the humans. Not as an envoy, not as a general, but as a bride. It was a political alliance no one had wanted to admit openly, a marriage meant to seal the fragile truce that might finally stop the bloodshed. Many of her soldiers muttered under their breaths, calling it a gamble. Lyra herself had never married, never felt the pull of emotion in the way humans claimed to, but she had trained her entire life to serve the Empire, and duty was her only compass. The human planet of Talvin spread below her like a golden sea, small clusters of settlements, dust roads twisting through the desert, occasional bursts of green where irrigation had carved life into the harsh land. She spurred her hoverbike forward, leaving the ridge and gliding into the heart of the valley. The humans watched her arrival from a distance, wary and tense. They had never welcomed Astralis soldiers, not as conquerors, not as diplomats, not as anything. Yet here she was, a strange combination of both, a warrior and a bride. At the central settlement, a crowd gathered. Farmers, merchants, soldiers, and children peered from behind walls and market stalls. Lyra dismounted, her polished boots sinking slightly into the sandy soil. Her escort stayed behind, their weapons holstered but ready. She walked with measured steps, each one echoing her resolve. She had 1 hour to meet him, the human who would, in theory, end the war. His name was Eli Mercer. He wasn't a general, wasn't a politician. He was a farmer, known for his sharp mind and even sharper aim, someone the humans respected for his courage during raids. Some said he had survived 3 encounters with Astralis patrols and lived to tell the tale. Lyra had heard stories about him, exaggerated, romanticized, and terrifying all at once. And now she was to marry him. She entered the main hall, a structure carved from sandstone and reinforced with metal plates salvaged from old battles. Eli stood at the center, tall, broad-shouldered, with dusty brown hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed to measure her as carefully as she measured him. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect, not fear. Lyra noted it with quiet approval. "Commander Lyra Vey," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I hope your journey wasn't unpleasant?" Lyra tilted her head. "The desert is harsh, but I've faced worse," she replied. She didn't smile. She had learned long ago that her expressions carried weight she did not intend. "I am here because my Empress believes this. Union will bring peace. I am here because my duty demands it." Ellie nodded slowly, as if weighing her words. Peace is a strange word in these times. We have fought long and hard for survival. And now the Empire asks for marriage as a solution? Lyra's eyes flickered, the faintest trace of irritation crossing her features. The Empire does not ask. It commands. But I am willing to negotiate the terms, as long as bloodshed ends. She paused. "Do you accept the risk, human?" Eli's gaze didn't waver. "I accept the risk," he said simply. "I will do what is necessary for my people." The words were blunt, honest, and Lyra had to suppress a shiver. Humans were strange creatures. They lacked the telepathy of her kind, the structured discipline of the Empire, yet they carried a stubbornness that seemed invincible. The ceremony was brief, not for the sake of tradition, but for practicality. Witnesses from both sides, a few words spoken in an archaic dialect, and a contract signed to seal the bond. Lyra felt a strange emptiness as she exchanged rings with Eli. There was no warmth, no sudden connection, only the cold certainty that this act was a gamble, one she hoped would pay off. Afterward, Eli led her outside. The desert night had fallen, stars shining like scattered diamonds across the inky sky. A wind rose, carrying the faint scent of metal and sand. Lyra adjusted her cloak, scanning the settlement once more. "Your people, do they trust me?" she asked. Eli chuckled softly. "Some do, most don't. But they will listen, eventually. They survive by adapting. You may be the greatest adaptation they've ever seen. And you? Do you trust me?" Eli's eyes held hers for a long moment. "I don't know you. I've heard stories of the Empire's warriors. You could destroy us all in an hour. But I also know that the war has taken everything from us. If this marriage ends it, I will stand by it. Stand by you." His voice softened almost imperceptibly. "Do not mistake duty for weakness." Duty was all she had ever known. She allowed herself a small sigh. Perhaps in this fragile moment she could believe in something else. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was more to humans than their defiance. The first week passed slowly. Lyra observed the humans, walking among them in their dusty markets, sharing meals of simple roasted meat and flatbread. She noticed the subtle ways they communicated, the humor hidden in small gestures, the pride in survival despite scarcity. Eli remained near her side, not as a guard, but as a guide. He introduced her to farmers who had once fought against her people, to children who stared at her with wide eyes, to elders who whispered stories of past battles. Yet the peace they sought was fragile. Rumors of rogue Astralis soldiers and human rebels reached them daily. Each whisper carried the threat of renewed conflict. Lyra spent long nights studying the maps of Talvin, planning patrols and defenses, all while trying to understand the humans she had been sent to embrace. She found herself respecting their courage, even their foolishness. Humans were unpredictable, but they were not weak. Not in the way the Empire believed. One evening, Eli took her to the edge of the cliffs where she had first arrived. The wind tugged at her cloak, the desert stretching endlessly below. "You know," he said quietly, "no Empire dares to fight us for very long. They all think they can break us, but they cannot. Not completely."
Lyra raised an eyebrow.
"And why is that?" she asked, genuinely curious. In the Empire, strength was measured in fleets, in technology, in order. Humans had none of those in excess. Eli smiled faintly, eyes distant. "Because humans endure. We learn. We fight with everything we have, even when the odds are impossible. And when the impossible becomes possible, empires hesitate. They leave before they learn our full strength." He turned to her. "You'll see. Marriage or not, we are not as fragile as you think." For the first time, Lyra felt a flicker of unease. The human's resilience was unnerving. It challenged everything she had been taught about conquest, about power, about victory, and perhaps this was the key to the peace she sought. Not domination. Not fear, but respect. Days turned into weeks. Lyra began training with the human militia, showing them combat techniques from the Empire, sharing strategies that could save lives rather than take them. Eli watched, sometimes silently, sometimes offering advice that surprised her with its practicality. Slowly, a bond formed. Not of love, not yet, but of mutual understanding. They were allies by circumstance, partners by necessity. Yet the seeds of trust were planted, fragile as they were, in the harsh soil of Talvin. One night as the twin moons rose over the desert, casting silver light across the dunes, Lyra found herself alone with Eli. The settlement was quiet, save for the distant howl of wind and the occasional clatter of a door. Eli looked at her, expression serious. "You should know, Lyra, the Empire doesn't understand humans the way you do. They think control is enough. They don't see what we see. They don't know why no one dares to fight us for long." Lyra met his gaze steadily. "Then teach me." And in that quiet moment, under the alien sky, the lines between duty and curiosity blurred. Lyra did not yet understand the depths of human strength. She did not yet know the sacrifices they had made, the cunning they possessed, the stubborn defiance that had kept them alive for centuries. But she knew one thing. This marriage was more than politics. It was a test, a trial. And the war, whether she liked it or not, was far from over. She did not know it yet, but her life, her loyalty, and perhaps her heart were about to be challenged in ways no empire had ever imagined. The morning sun cast long shadows over Talvin, painting the desert in streaks of gold and crimson. Commander Lyra Vey had grown accustomed to the harsh beauty of this world, but even now the planet's surprises were endless. Eli Mercer walked beside her, guiding her to the northern border of the settlement. Rumors had reached them that a rogue faction of humans, angered by the peace, had begun organizing raids. Lyra's sharp eyes scanned the horizon, ever alert. Even married into this mission, she knew duty came first. "This way," Eli said, motioning toward a narrow canyon. The rocks rose like ancient walls, creating a natural choke point. "If they attack, this is where we can hold them." He carried no weapon, yet his posture spoke of readiness. Lyra noticed how confidently he moved, someone who knew every step of his land, every crevice, every danger. She nodded. The Empire taught me strategies, Eli, but this is different. Terrain is everything here. Her voice softened. I need to understand how humans survive against odds like these. Eli smiled faintly. Then you'll learn fast. Survival here isn't about technology. It's about knowing when to fight and when to wait. The sun climbed higher and Lyra joined Eli's militia in their morning drills. Humans were nothing like Astralis soldiers. They didn't have telepathy, they didn't wear power armor, and their weapons were rudimentary compared to the Empire's precision tools. Yet every move they made was precise, every strategy grounded in experience rather than theory. Lyra had to admit, this was why no Empire had ever truly conquered them. Humans adapted, improvised, and fought smarter than she had expected. A sudden alarm shattered the calm. A scout's voice echoed over the settlement's crude communication system. Rogue faction spotted. North Ridge, they're moving fast. Lyra's heart quickened. This was it, the first real test of her uneasy alliance. She grabbed a plasma rifle, adjusted her cloak, and followed Eli toward the northern ridge. Dust swirled around them as they sprinted, and the humans moved with astonishing coordination. Lyra realized she had underestimated them. They were not farmers anymore. They were soldiers of necessity. As they reached the ridge, the rogue faction emerged from the canyon. Unlike the disciplined soldiers of the Empire, these humans were wild-eyed and desperate, wielding makeshift weapons and crude energy guns scavenged from old battles. But desperation can be dangerous, Lyra reminded herself. Even a small spark can start a wildfire. Eli stepped forward. Hold! Don't fire unless I give the signal. His voice carried authority, unshakable despite the chaos. The rogues hesitated, unsure of what to expect from this unarmed, but clearly confident, human leader. Lyra noted their confusion. It would give them the advantage if they acted smartly. Minutes passed like hours. Then the first rogue took a step forward, and Eli fired a warning shot from a handheld blaster. The shot went wide, but the message was clear. He had control. Lyra's pulse pounded as she watched humans obey commands not from fear, but from trust in one of their own. It was remarkable. The confrontation ended without bloodshed. The rogues, seeing no advantage, retreated into the canyon. Lyra exhaled, lowering her rifle. She glanced at Eli. You made them back down. Without killing anyone. Ellie shrugged. Humans know when a fight isn't worth dying for. You may see this as weakness, but it's strength in disguise. His eyes held a subtle warning. You still have a lot to learn about my people. That night, Lyra stood on the edge of the settlement again, watching the twin moons rise over the desert dunes. Eli approached quietly, his footsteps barely audible over the wind. You handled yourself well today, he said. But strength isn't just about fighting. Lyra turned to him, curiosity sparking in her eyes. Then what is it, Eli? He hesitated, then spoke softly, almost as if confessing a secret. It's patience. It's endurance. Humans survive because we endure. Because we learn to anticipate threats, and because we trust in ways others cannot understand. He looked at her closely. You think the Empire is strong because it dominates, because it strikes first and strikes hard. But there's a different kind of power here, and it's why no Empire has ever crushed us completely. Lyra felt a chill. This was more than political strategy. This was philosophy, a code she hadn't been trained to understand. The human subtle strength was in endurance, in adaptation, in unpredictability. She realized that marrying a human was not just a political move. It was a study, a test of whether she could comprehend a force unlike anything she had known. The next days brought further revelations. Eli led her to the hidden archives beneath the settlement, a collection of human history and intelligence gathered over centuries of survival. Lyra pored over records of battles, of near misses, of empires that had tried to conquer the humans and failed. The numbers were staggering. No army had ever stayed long enough to truly learn human tactics. They leave before they understand, Eli said quietly, watching her reaction. Or sometimes they return after underestimating us, and by then, it's too late. Lyra frowned, absorbing the weight of his words. She had always believed that the Empire's precision, its discipline, and its overwhelming firepower were enough. But here, on this desert planet, she realized something critical. Humans had something she could not quantify. Resilience, ingenuity, and the stubborn refusal to surrender even when logic dictated otherwise. Days later, a troubling report reached them. An unknown force had been detected moving toward Talvin from the outer desert. Unlike the rogue faction, these were not humans. The scanners picked up armored vehicles, weapons far more advanced than anything the settlers had. Lyra's mind raced. Could the Empire have sent reinforcements? Or was it another unknown alien force seeking to take advantage of the fragile peace? Eli remained calm. "We'll prepare," he said simply. "But know this, Lyra. This planet fights in ways your Empire doesn't expect. And if they come, they will learn why no one ever wins here easily." Lyra began coordinating defenses, combining human ingenuity with her knowledge of Empire tactics. They dug trenches, set traps, and reinforced settlements with whatever resources were available. She taught humans to handle plasma rifles more effectively, to set energy shields strategically, and to anticipate ambushes. In return, she learned their improvisations: sand-covered decoys, hidden caves, and underground water sources that doubled as emergency routes. Through it all, her bond with Eli deepened. They argued over strategy, laughed at small jokes, and shared stories of their respective worlds. Lyra realized that she was not only learning about human strength, but also forming a connection with the man she was supposed to marry. It was strange, unpredictable, and compelling. Then, one night, as they patrolled the outer perimeter, Eli stopped suddenly. "Look." Lyra followed his gaze. On the horizon, a faint glimmer of light moved across the desert sands. It was fast, calculated, and unlike anything she had seen before. Her pulse quickened. This was not the rogue faction. This was something far more dangerous. Eli's expression hardened. "They've come for us," he said simply. "And it's time you see the true power of humans. Not as soldiers. Not as farmers, but as a species that survives. Against all odds." Lyra felt a thrill of anticipation mixed with fear. The Empire had underestimated them. So had she. And now, standing beside Eli, she would witness firsthand why no Empire dared to fight humans fully. The battle to come would test everything she believed about strength, loyalty, and the limits of power. As the first glowing vehicles appeared on the horizon, Lyra gripped her rifle tightly. Her mind was clear. She would fight, she would survive, and she would learn the truth, because this was only the beginning. The desert held its breath, waiting for the storm to break. The twin moons of Talvin hung high over the desert, casting silver shadows across the dunes. Commander Lyra Vey crouched behind a low ridge, eyes scanning the horizon. The glowing vehicles approached steadily, moving like predators in the night. Eli Mercer stood beside her, calm yet alert, his rifle trained on the first signs of movement. "Remember," Eli whispered, "this is not just a fight. This is a lesson. The Empire, or whoever comes, doesn't understand humans yet. We survive in ways they can't imagine." Lyra's hand tightened on her plasma rifle. She had trained with humans for weeks now, seen their ingenuity, their patience, their endurance. But nothing could prepare her for the sight that now unfolded. The approaching vehicles were unlike anything she had encountered. Sleek armored machines, weapons bristling, moving with the precision of a well-trained military force. Whoever they were, they came prepared for total domination. Eli gave a signal, and the human militia sprang into action. Shadows moved across the dunes, armed men emerging from hidden trenches, decoys rolling across the sand, and hidden energy shields activating with near-invisible precision. Lyra's breath caught. This was not disorganized resistance. This was a symphony of calculated chaos. The first vehicles opened fire, plasma bolts streaking across the desert night. Lyra ducked behind a boulder, narrowly avoiding a blast that would have shredded her armor. Eli's voice rang out, steady and commanding. "Hold! Don't waste your shots. Let them overextend." The humans obeyed. They waited, hidden among rocks and sand traps, moving with patience and timing that rivaled any Empire regiment. Lyra realized for the first time that human strength was not just in firepower, it was in their minds. They predicted, they adapted, they lured the enemy into traps. Every movement she had learned from the Empire was turned on its head. Minutes stretched into tense hours. One of the enemy vehicles, overconfident, ventured too close to a concealed trench. Eli fired a precise shot, triggering a hidden energy net that immobilized the machine. The humans swarmed it, disabling its weapons with surgical precision. Lyra's pulse raced. She had seen countless battles, but never like this. Humans fighting not with brute force, but with cunning and patience that turned the desert itself into a weapon. Then came the twist. A sudden tremor shook the ground. From behind the dunes another force emerged. Not vehicles, not soldiers, but massive, mechanical drones, alien in design, with glowing red sensors scanning the terrain. Lyra's heart sank. This was not the Empire. This was something else entirely. Something far more dangerous. Eli's jaw tightened. They weren't expecting this, he muttered. I've been tracking them for weeks, but even I underestimated their approach. The drones advanced, weapons charging, and for the first time, Lyra saw fear flicker in the eyes of even the bravest human fighters. But Eli's resolve was unshakable. He ran along the ridge, directing his people, using hand signals and shouted orders to manipulate the terrain. Lyra followed, her mind racing to keep up. The humans had planned for ambushes, for deception, for betrayal, but not for technology this advanced. A sudden flash illuminated the desert. One of the drones had fired, striking a human barricade. Dust and debris filled the air, screams echoing across the dunes. Lyra lunged to protect a group of fighters, shielding them with her body as another blast grazed her shoulder. Pain shot through her arm, but she ignored it. The battle had only just begun. Eli signaled again, and a hidden canyon trap activated. The drones fell into a pit covered by camouflaged sand. Humans swarmed from above, disabling the machines with makeshift EMP charges. Lyra watched in awe. Each move was precise, daring, and deadly effective, not because the humans had superior weapons, but because they had superior strategy. Amid the chaos, Lyra noticed something strange. One of the enemy drones moved differently, almost as if controlled remotely. Its movements were too intelligent, too adaptive. Eli's eyes narrowed as he studied it. This isn't just a drone, he said under his breath. Someone is controlling it, and they know exactly what we will do next. Lyra's mind raced. Could this be a scout from the Empire? Or perhaps a third party, watching the humans, testing their strength? Either way, the stakes had just doubled. Hours passed, the battle stretching into exhaustion. Humans and machines clashed in a blur of dust, energy, and sand. Lyra found herself side by side with Eli, moving as one with the fighters. She realized she trusted him implicitly, his intuition, his tactics, even his judgment. Together they became a force the drones could not predict. And then it happened. A betrayal. One of the human militia, a man Lyra had trained and trusted, turned against them. He had been secretly feeding information to the drone's controllers, hoping to end the humans' independence and force them under alien control. Eli reacted instantly, striking him down before he could cause more damage. Lyra felt a pang of disbelief. Even here, betrayal existed, hidden in plain sight. The final phase of the battle arrived. Eli led a coordinated assault, using the terrain, decoys, and traps to funnel the remaining drones into a narrow canyon. Lyra and the humans disabled each one systematically, their patience and coordination turning near defeat into triumph. By dawn, the desert fell silent. Smoke rose from destroyed drones, sand was scarred with trenches and tracks, and the humans stood victorious, exhausted but alive. Lyra sank to her knees, her body trembling from adrenaline and exhaustion. Eli knelt beside her, his hand on her shoulder. You see now, he said quietly, why no empire dares to fight humans fully. Not because we are stronger, not because we have better weapons, but because we survive where others fail. We endure, we adapt, we strike when they least expect it. Lyra nodded, her mind spinning. She had witnessed it firsthand, the cunning, patience, and resilience of humans. It was nothing like the Empire's philosophy, nothing like she had been trained to believe. She realized in that moment that she had underestimated them, underestimated him, underestimated herself. As the first rays of sunlight touched the desert, Lyra stood beside Eli, looking out over the battlefield. The humans had won, but the cost was evident. Lives had been lost, and the threat of the Empire, or other forces, still loomed. Yet she felt a strange sense of hope. This marriage, this alliance, was more than politics. It was a chance to witness the true strength of a species the universe had overlooked for far too long. Eli looked at her, a faint smile on his lips despite the exhaustion. You've changed, Lyra. You see humans now, not as enemies, but as something greater. Something worth protecting. Lyra met his gaze, her own expression softening for the first time. And I see why no empire has ever crushed you completely, she admitted. It's not just the fighting. It's everything, the endurance, the cunning, the heart. Eli nodded. Exactly. And there are more secrets to learn, more battles to survive. But for now, we endure. Together. The desert stretched before them, silent and vast. The battle had ended, but the war, both political and personal, was far from over. Lyra understood now that her journey with the humans and with Eli would test every belief she had ever held. And she was ready to face it, because the story of survival was far from finished. Under the rising sun, the humans gathered, tending to the wounded, repairing defenses, and preparing for the challenges that lay ahead. Lyra walked among them, learning, observing, and understanding. She realized that this was only the beginning of her true education, the education of a species whose strength was measured not in firepower or discipline, but in resilience, ingenuity, and the refusal to surrender. And somewhere deep in her heart she began to feel a new bond forming, not just with Eli, but with the human spirit itself. A bond that would define the next chapter of this fragile peace, and perhaps change the course of the universe itself. The desert had spoken. Humans had survived, and Lyra knew without a doubt that the Empire, or anyone else, would think twice before underestimating them again. The sun rose over Talvin, burning away the last shadows of the night battle. The desert lay quiet now, but the scars of war remained. Sand and dust clung to battered human armor and scorched vehicle remains. Commander Lyra Vey stood on the ridge, surveying the battlefield with a mixture of awe and relief. The humans had survived, yet she knew the true challenge was just beginning, proving that peace could last, and that alliances could hold where empires had failed. Eli Mercer approached, his uniform smeared with dust, yet his posture unbroken. "They'll send more," he said quietly, scanning the horizon. "Always more. But they'll think twice now, and that is what matters." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of his words. She had learned so much in the past weeks about humans, about survival, about herself. The Empire's assumptions about weakness, about control, about domination had all been shattered. Humans were stronger than any numerical superiority, stronger than advanced weapons. Strength wasn't measured in firepower alone. It was measured in endurance, in cunning, in the willingness to sacrifice everything to survive. The settlement slowly stirred back to life. Humans repaired their homes, tended to the wounded, and began planning for a future that was still uncertain. Lyra walked among them, offering advice where she could, sharing insights from her experience, and quietly learning from them at the same time. She realized that leadership wasn't about commanding, it was about trust, about understanding, about recognizing strengths in others that were invisible to outsiders. Eli joined her at the central plaza, where the remaining militia gathered to honor their fallen. "They fought well," he said softly. "But it wasn't just their skill, it was their heart. That's what makes humans, humans." Lyra looked at him, her expression serious. "And what about the Empire?" "They've seen us now. They'll know we can resist." "Do you think they'll leave us alone?" Eli's eyes met hers with a quiet intensity. "They might hesitate, but they'll never understand us fully. And that is our advantage. Not fear, not technology, not numbers, understanding. They can't fight what they don't understand." For the first time, Lyra felt a sense of purpose beyond duty. She was no longer just a commander sent to enforce a political alliance. She had become a student of human resilience, a protector of a species that refused to bend. And standing beside Eli, she understood that this mission, this marriage, wasn't merely about ending a war. It was about building a future. The first ceremony to officially mark the peace took place in the central plaza. Humans and surviving settlers gathered, along with a small delegation from the Empire, curious observers sent to witness the outcome. Lyra and Eli stood at the center, exchanging words of commitment. This was no ordinary marriage. It was a symbol, a promise that conflict could end, that understanding could replace fear. As they exchanged vows, Lyra noticed the subtle gestures of respect from the humans around her. They weren't just observing a political arrangement. They were acknowledging something deeper. They were acknowledging that she had fought with them, that she had learned from them, and that she had chosen to stand with them rather than above them. After the ceremony, Eli led Lyra to the edge of the cliffs, overlooking the sprawling desert below. "Look at them," he said quietly. "They're not just survivors, they're builders. Fighters, innovators. And now, you see what the Empire never did. They're free in ways no one can take from them." Lyra's gaze followed his, and for the first time she felt a spark of genuine admiration, even affection, for the humans and for Eli himself. She had entered this world as a commander, a diplomat, a bride by political necessity, but now she understood that she was part of something greater. Something alive, unpredictable, and extraordinary. Suddenly, alarms sounded from the settlement's outskirts. Lyra's heart leapt, but Eli placed a hand on her shoulder. "Relax," he said. "It's just a scouting team. They want to observe, learn, nothing more." Lyra exhaled slowly, realizing that she had been holding her breath without noticing. This was Talvin's way. Peace was never guaranteed, but strength came from preparation, unity, and trust. And she had learned that humans embodied all three. Later, as night fell, the twin moons casting silver over the desert dunes, Lyra and Eli walked along the cliffs in silence. Words were unnecessary. The bond forged in battle and in survival spoke louder than any vow. They had seen the worst, survived it, and come out stronger. And in that moment, the Empire's shadows seemed smaller, distant, irrelevant. Eli stopped and turned to her. "Lyra," he said softly, "you've seen what humans can do, but there's something more. You've learned it, I think. The lesson the Empire can never teach. That strength isn't just in weapons or armies. It's in heart, in courage, in refusal to surrender." Lyra nodded. "I see it now, Eli. I see why no Empire dares to fight you fully, and I see why I am here, not just to end a war, but to protect a people who refuse to be broken." Eli's hand brushed hers. "And now we build something new. Not because it's easy, not because it's guaranteed, but because it's worth it. Together." The next morning, Lyra addressed the settlement. She spoke not as a commander, not as an envoy, but as an ally. "This marriage, this alliance, is more than a symbol," she said. "It is a promise. A promise that we will endure, that we will adapt, and that we will protect what we hold dear. We face dangers, yes, but together we are unstoppable." The humans cheered, their voices ringing across the desert. Lyra felt a warmth she had never experienced in the rigid halls of the Empire. She realized that respect and trust could be more powerful than fear and obedience. Weeks passed. Trade routes reopened, settlements were rebuilt, and scouts reported fewer enemy incursions. Lyra continued to train with the humans, sharing her knowledge while absorbing theirs. Every lesson, every experience, strengthened her understanding of what humans truly represented, a force that no empire, no matter how advanced, could control entirely. One evening, as she and Eli watched the sunset, he turned to her with a wry smile. "You've changed, Commander. Or should I say, bride?" Lyra laughed softly, the sound carrying across the cliffs. "I've changed, but not just because of you. Because of them. Because of this planet. Because of what it means to fight, to survive, to endure." Ellie nodded. "And what about the Empire? Will they learn from this?" Lyra shook her head. "Some will try, most will not. They think strength is domination. They don't understand endurance, cunning, and courage that comes from the heart. But that's okay. They don't need to understand fully. They just need to know they cannot defeat what they do not understand." As night fell, the desert around Talvin glowed softly under the twin moons. Burned in the settlement, casting flickering light on the faces of humans who had survived, who had fought, who had endured. Lyra stood among them, no longer an outsider, no longer just a commander sent to enforce peace. She was part of something bigger, something unyielding. She had married a human to end a war, and in doing so had discovered why no empire dared to fight them completely. The desert wind carried whispers of future battles, of challenges yet to come. But for the first time, Lyra did not fear. With humans like Eli, with the people who refused to surrender, and with the lessons she had learned, she knew that the future, no matter how uncertain, was theirs to shape. And in that moment, as the stars blinked above and the fires flickered below, Lyra understood fully. This was more than survival. It was victory. Not just over enemies, but over doubt, over assumptions, over the limitations she had once believed were unbreakable. The Empire had underestimated humans. The universe had underestimated them. But Lyra would never underestimate them again. With Eli by her side and the humans around her, she felt a quiet triumph, a knowledge that no empire, no force, no threat could ever truly conquer a species that refused to be broken. Talvin was alive. The humans were alive. And together, they had changed the course of history.